The school years mark off a very special season of life. How will a school experience equip children to become productive, fulfilled adults? And how will those school years affect the story of their lives?
Read the sentence for me, Carl.
We all want to see our children move successfully through school. What makes the difference between success and failure for a child? One of the answers is how we teach them to cope with frustration, with defeat, with disappointment.
When we went in for the meeting and she told us that she had some concerns, that he really seemed to be just putting all kinds of effort forth in trying to learn, and it just wasn't coming.
As new relationships grow, both parents and teenagers can have a hard time establishing ground rules.
You cannot be too permissive. You can't be too much a teenager's friend. There have to be limits.
Biological, social, and psychological changes can turn adolescence into a turbulent, frightening chapter.
You just feel so alone. Like, that's the whole scare of being a teenager, is because so many people think they are entirely alone.
Make sure you can see the
Comma bar.
This is a program about growth and change in the season of childhood and adolescence. With the help of experts in human development, we'll see some of the new opportunities and challenges that face us in this season. We'll meet people who will share their stories, and we'll discover that their stories are part of our story, part of the seasons of life. You know, in their school years, children are filled with energy and imagination. They can be anything, do anything. They're all future dancers or philosophers, doctors, poets. You know, many of these children with their bright, shining faces will grow up to be productive, confident adults. But others won't. They'll lose that sparkle. What makes the difference? Well, that's the big question as children try to understand who they are, what they're good at, what their bodies are doing, who their friends are, who they might become. And these are some of the questions we'll look at in one of the most exciting but least understood chapters of the life story, childhood and adolescence, as we continue our passage through the seasons of life.
You stop and you look both ways, and then you cross the street.
Meet Jamila Johnson of Roxbury, Massachusetts. She's 6 years old. Like children everywhere, she's about to leave the familiar world of home for the brave new world of school.
Remember that for me, please? See that big building? That's your school. That's where you're going to the first grade, and then we're going to find out where the first grade is, aren't we?
The first day of school, Jamila and her grandmother seem to sense that the special relationship they've shared is about to change.
Goodbye. And you're going to be on your own. You think you're ready? You kind of nervous?
No, I'm nervous.
Okay, you give me a big hug. And you're going to learn everything for Grandma, right?
As Jamila lets go of her grandmother's hand, she's beginning a new chapter in her life story. In this chapter, a different cast of characters comes on stage.
Eyes up here and look at the apple on the bicycle. Everybody, turn this way so you can see the apple on the bicycle.
Miss Hines is a veteran teacher, and right away she makes it clear what she expects.
Put it over on your heart and eyes up on the flag.
The message is, you're in school now. It's time to toe the line.
And we will say, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
Throughout the school years, there's a persistent pressure to act your age. We call that the social clock. At no time in the life cycle will the social clock have more influence on a person's life story than during the school years. When she was in preschool, Jamila learned by playing. But school will teach children how to learn in a different way. They'll have to follow the agenda set forth by Miss Hines.
We're going to stand still and quiet. quiet. And we'll be close. We'll be right behind the person that was in front of us. So when we stand up front, it looks like there's only one person. You can't see who's right behind you. Come up here, Anthony and Marcus, please.
Ms. Hines knows that even before children begin to learn the basics of reading and writing, they'll have to learn how to be pupils. They'll have to learn to follow complicated verbal instructions, and they'll have to learn to coordinate their actions with other children.
Can you see Marcus now? You can't see his face, can you? Stand up. He's standing tall now. Can you see him now? Is he wiggling out like this? No, he's beautiful. He's right behind.
We eat quietly, and we eat in our seats together. Girls, we eat seated. Nobody gets up until they have to.
No matter what the rules are at home, the rules at school apply to everyone. So this is a very important time in a child's evolving life story, when they start to make friends.
Anyways, why are you leaving here? Why are you leaving here? So I don't get no friend to play with. Don't?
As Jamila seeks new friends, she'll look for people like herself, and that's one important way she'll establish her own identity and find out who she is.
Jamila's standing in the schoolyard beginning a process that could be just as important, more important than what's happening in the school. Because she's reaching out, she's trying to make friends. And she's going to form in the next half dozen years a set of alliances. And the children are going to be deciding who are the jocks and who are not the jocks, who are the musicians, who are not the musicians. It's a process of sorting out where you are, where you want to be, what your relationship with others is going to be, who are the others that are going to be part of we, and who the others are going to be part of they.
The experts tell us that this process of seeking out and sorting out can be stimulating to some children, overwhelming to others. How children deal with these kinds of transitions often depends on what's happened to them before, especially at home, and on how much support they've been given.
What we saw in the case of Jamila is a very supportive grandmother who not only was there with her, but was giving her information about what she would encounter, what she needs to be careful of. And I think the grandmother also conveyed the idea that this is an important time in life, that she should expect that it was going to be new and exciting.
At the playground, there's both opportunity and risk. The opportunity to make a lifelong friend, the risk of being rejected. Parents can't shelter their children from the demands of school, but they can teach them how to cope with frustrations. Carl Haglund is 9, a third grader at Minadeo Elementary School in Pittsburgh.
You aim for those two dots, okay? See the middle dot? You aim for the one to the right, okay? Okay. Good, wrong side.
Daddy! Wait, how?
Didn't get anything, Carl.
Carl has 2 older brothers, and in bowling, as in just about everything else, Carl seems to be overshadowed by his brother John, who's 15.
It's difficult being the youngest, I think. There's 6 years difference between he and his oldest brother, so his oldest brother is quite capable of doing a lot of things and has more accomplishments than Carl has.
99?
Yeah. No, wait, no.
Carl Haglund is sorting out his place in an unusual family, with one brother who's academically gifted and another brother who's mentally retarded. Jerry's 12.
We've had to explain to Carl that at times he has to be more understanding of Jerry's special needs. And that can be frustrating for a 9-year-old to always understand. But yet again, when push comes to shove, Carl wants to be where Jerry is.
Hey,
So I see it, I guess, as the real typical sibling rivalry, you know.
The backyard treehouse is a favorite getaway for Carl and his best friend Philip. From boards and a few nails, they've created an adventure land, the kind all 9-year-olds love. Just an ordinary kid, that's what his mother thought, till she got a call from Carl's teacher in kindergarten.
When she contacted me and said she wanted to talk with me, I kind of thought, oh no. And when we went in for the meeting and she told us that she had some concerns, that he really seemed to be just putting all kinds of effort forth in trying to learn, and it just wasn't coming, that she was concerned there might be a learning problem, and she was sorry to tell us, and she knew it was probably a surprise. And I thought deep down, I just had that sense that this might be.
Have fun, okay? Bye-bye.
For the past 3 years, Carl has been enrolled in a learning disabilities class in a public school. It's been determined that Carl has trouble handling sequential information.
I haven't said anything yet. Sound. A. Letters. A-Y. Letters.
In this classroom, a special teacher helps him overcome his reading problems.
Sound. At. Sound. Ooh, somebody's thinking. Letters.
Not many children will face the same kind of severe learning disabilities as Carl.
Read the sentence for me, Carl.
But many children have problems of one kind or another. How will they cope with them? Well, Carl's parents are helping him to confront a difficult situation. And when he faces other problems later in life, he'll remember how his family helped him through this one.
Ladder.
In a year, Carl went from not being able to read or write his name or even say the numbers 1 to 10, 5 out of 10 times he would get them wrong. And he was able to learn this in 1 year in a learning disabilities classroom because he knew that it was business and he had to concentrate, and they taught him the tools that he needed to learn that you and I don't always have to learn. It comes natural with us. He has to learn them.
I can read better than before.
And you're learning how to study, right? And you're learning how to read.
Yeah, but I don't know how to read them.
But they're teaching you how to do things
Better.
better.
The scary pumpkins are set for Carl's first Halloween party. He's invited 15 of his very best friends.
John, Katie, Jerry, Peter, and Tom.
Even in his werewolf costume, Carl doesn't forget his responsibilities as host.
He's only 9, but yet he had friends that he has kept from nursery school. He has friends that he kept from his regular school. Most of his friends are boys.
Okay, ready? Okay, now go.
Carl is very sociable, enjoys people, enjoys life. And Carl doesn't think of himself as having a learning disability. Carl thinks of himself as having some problem, but Carl has such a positive attitude and a good self-image that Carl is going to be whatever he wants to be. And I'm sure of that because he just has this drive. He never gives up.
Almost all kids have some area in which they are having a little trouble. But if kids begin to learn that they can at least make some headway in addressing these difficulties, it's less likely to begin to become a devastating self-esteem issue. And they can feel more in control of handling difficulties.
Each child develops with a set of skills unique to him that he was born with and a set of learning experiences. When those skills and those learning experiences do not meet what is needed of him in a particular learning task in school, he's not going to do as well at that task. That doesn't mean that he isn't an extremely skilled person in another area, and it doesn't mean that he's not going to be a very adequate person in our society.
But how do you find out where you'll fit into grown-up society? In middle childhood, children are starting to find out what their skills are. They're beginning to think about what they might do as adults. When children try things, new activities like art or music or sports, they start to find out what they're good at. They develop self-assurance, a sense of competence. I can do it. And when I grow up, I'll be able to do something important with my life. The Blue Ribbon is the highest award handed out at the Butler County Farm Show.
Junior fitter was Sarah McCrum, second place, Amber Leslie, third place, Lee Allen Yeager.
Every competitor at this livestock exhibition hopes to take home a blue ribbon. But in this event, the judge has not called Jason Kennedy's name.
We'd like to have the senior showman in. Senior showman.
Yeah, I didn't even place.
I know, but you did all right. It shows all right.
I usually get first place, so sometimes I get beat. And he usually doesn't notice the bad parts on it, but sometimes he does.
Jason's 11, the youngest of 5 children of Jim and Rita Kennedy. The Kennedys own a large dairy farm in Butler County, Pennsylvania. They've farmed this land for 5 generations.
Jason takes his part in raising calves, doing odds and end chores, doing small type field work right now. He is just beginning to be viable enough to give a job to and expect a job done and have it done right. Economically, he's not expected to do anything other than participate and be part of the family.
Yeah, my dad probably raised me the same way I'm raising my kids. You know, have the responsibility and you do the job. If you don't do the job, you'll do it right the next time. And yeah, I would say that I had similar responsibilities. Whenever I was Jason's age, we had a team of horses. Instead of 100 and 150 horsepower tractors, we had 25 and 30 horsepower tractors. We had none of the power equipment that we got today.
School was a struggle for him. Reading is a struggle for him. And he has the ability. It's just what you might call lazy. He doesn't want to do it. The ability's there. He just doesn't push himself to do it. As soon as they get home from school, they don't want to do their homework then. And you start your barn work, they go to the barn. And when you come up and have supper, by the time it's already 8 o'clock, and you wonder where the time went. Then they want to watch a little bit of TV. And it's kind of hard to say, you have to go do your homework now. And so we're trying to work it out that they can come up a little earlier and start some homework before we come up for supper. And I'm hoping it's going to work out for Jason, so he needs the time.
Jason's already figured out that classroom work may not be as important to his future as the lessons he learns on the farm. His father will probably be Jason's most important teacher. Jim Kennedy has already taught his son some of the secrets of showing animals.
If she walks too fast and steps are too big, so you slow her down some. Like if her back slouches down, you can tickle her belly and she puts it up.
Some of the people towards the bottom of the class.
Jason has done a good job of showing cattle. We stress that you show the animal to the best of the animal's ability. And Jason knows how to do those kind of things real well. He pays attention to business.
First place to Jason Kennedy, second place to John Kennedy. Both blue ribbon winners.
Let's give him a hand.
I probably got some of the best showmen in the state of Pennsylvania. And Jason's not to be taken slight whenever he gets out there with a bunch of adults to show cattle.
If Jason takes over the farm when he grows up, he'll be the 6th generation of Kennedys on the land. Jason's learned what it means to be a farmer by watching his father, and his father learned the same way. For most of human history before the Industrial Revolution, children learned about adult roles from their parents. But Jason's experience is rare. Today, few children have this kind of first-hand knowledge of what they'll be doing after they finish school. Think about it. How many young people today really understand what their parents do when they go off to work? How many young people have positive role models? That's why parents and other caring adults sharing experiences with their children help them connect between who they are and who they want to become. Candy Reed at 11. She's a 6th grader at Acme Elementary School.
Those are equal, right there. Those are equal. 2 equal notes there.
I'll play that
Play this line again, okay?
Like most of her family, she loves music. Candy's practicing for that first piano recital.
I'm going to play Joyful, Joyful, We Adore Thee by Ludwig van Beethoven.
Candy's mother is a single parent who has raised her daughter entirely on her own. But throughout her childhood, Candy's always been able to turn to her grandfather.
No, you try now.
I am about the only father she has, actually.
You clobber it in.
And I go places with her, and we do things together.
Hit it with a little conviction, you know.
Candy's at a rebellious age right now, and she wants to do something. She wants to do it. I mean, wants to feel that she's a big girl, but with all the things that are going on, we don't feel that she's quite big enough yet.
Candy feels she's a big girl now because she knows her body is changing. She's entered puberty and a new season of life called adolescence. But before she has time to get used to biological changes that are going on, she'll be hit by another big change. In Candy's school district, children enter junior high right after the 6th grade, and that can be frightening.
I think the hardest thing from 6th to 7th is the big change in the atmosphere. For one, the school's a lot bigger, a whole lot bigger. The school's a challenge now because there's a lot of older people, and at first they would just say, "Oh, look at all those little 7th graders walking down the hall," and sometimes that was hard, being called like a little 7th grader, but I think they understand it now better because they understand that they were once 7th graders too, and they didn't like it.
What's the quick way to do 486 times 100?
Last year, Candy had one teacher all day long. Now she meets 10 different teachers each week. So many things are changing.
And then once you're done with this surface...
Changes that an adolescent can handle when they come one at a time can seem overwhelming when they hit all at once. In junior high, young people are thrown into new social situations, and they can be unsure of how to act, so they take refuge in their friends.
I really don't have a best friend, but there is one that I hang around with a lot, and that's Amy Knoll, and she's nice, and I know that when I tell her a secret or something, that she won't spill the beans or anything. I know that she can keep a secret, and she trusts me too. Because I walked by the library and he was there, and I just kept on staring straight, and he was like, "Oh."
Candy spends about an hour a day talking with her friends, and that's average for girls her age. Most of the time they're talking about boys, and that worries Candy's mother.
Oh, yeah. Starting to date and everything, and she's just, I don't know, kind of worried about what the person's like, if he's nice, if he's cruel, or if he's a senior or something, if he's too old for me, or something like that.
So for you know that senior who likes me?
Yeah.
He asked for my picture today.
He did?
Mm-hmm. I have a picture here.
What did he say? I worry about peer pressure to be involved in some things that might just be beyond her understanding.
I don't know.
And I hope she feels that she can come to me and talk with me about them. Alienation frightens me. I'm afraid of alienating her, but yet I know there are lines that you you cannot cross. You can't be too permissive. You can't be too much a teenager's friend. There have to be limits. You know, she wants limits.
On the night of the annual semi-formal dance, girls and boys arrive separately. The boys hang out, waiting for the girls to arrive.
Oh, yeah. Into the dance.
The semi-formal is the junior high version of the prom. It's a rite of passage that moves boys and girls one step closer to being adults. In the space of just 1 year, the biological and social clocks have pushed Candy out of childhood. Now she's looking forward to becoming a teenager.
Well, some people say, oh, it's a whole bunch of trouble and everything, but I really don't think it could be that bad if you try real hard. I don't think being a teenager could be too much worse than this is.
You begin with a girl and end with a young woman, and that really does characterize this period. In fact, one way I like to think about this age period is that it's sort of like the seasonal changes in Minnesota where I grew up, that you have a period of time when from one day to the next you might go from winter to summer, winter, and then all of a sudden it's summer. Not very long in Minnesota, but in the case of kids at this age, they also are changing from day to day, and one day they might be more like children, the next day they're more grown up, but then they might revert. That can be very confusing to parents.
Those who study the lifespan tell us that adolescence can be particularly confusing when what they call the developmental clocks are out of sync. For instance, while a biological clock, the body's timetable, says you're a woman, you're capable of having a child, the social clock, society's timetable, might be saying, hold it, you're still a child yourself. It's the last week of school at a junior high in Indiana, Pennsylvania.
Take your faceplate off.
Kim Henderson is 15. She's a ninth grader.
And the outside of the cabinet.
Angie, where am I supposed to write?
In the last frantic minutes of the day, Kim and her classmates struggle to capture the memories of the past year in the margins of the yearbook. At 2:30, buses arrive to take students home to the rural areas around the town of Indiana. But today, as every day, Kim will get a ride home. Her mother's waiting to pick her up, waiting along with Angela. Angela is Kim's 18-month-old daughter.
35, I got a 0 on the first part.
Kimberly. So now what are you going to do?
I don't know. A lot of people didn't think it was right for me to be pregnant, and I was called a slut and every other name that they could think of for me. They called me prego. They called me other different sorts of names.
Well, when she first got pregnant, the kids at school really were on her bad. And I felt bad because it wasn't all her fault that she had become pregnant. It was the boy's fault too, but they never seemed to blame the boy. It's always the girl's fault when she becomes pregnant.
After I found out I went and told my boyfriend's parents. First thing they said, get an abortion. And my mom and his parents got into a big fight because that was against our religion. We don't believe in abortions. So they said, fine, have the baby and give it out for adoption.
But Kim chose to not only have her baby, but to keep her. Like 1 out of 5 babies today, Angela was born to a single mother who receives little or no support from the baby's father.
There's no way that I would have married him, even if he would have proposed to me. My life would have been a living hell. I know it would, because I'd more likely end up quitting school to take care of Angie, or I would never have gotten a career off because he wouldn't allow it.
Mom, come here and get her. What you gonna look like someday, Nanny? Because everybody says you look like your mom. Look at Mama's funny pictures. Looky, this is what Mama looked like when she was in kindergarten. Looky, her nose on the teepers almost.
Whenever we were little, my mom was always sad. My dad told my mom to get the hell out. The only reason he doesn't remember anything is because he was so drunk it wasn't funny. He couldn't walk. That's how drunk he was. When my dad kicked us out, I think that was the best thing that could ever happen to my mom.
Over the years, Kim and her mother have learned how to get by without much money. They take advantage of programs like WIC, which provides food vouchers and information on nutrition to low-income mothers.
Honey. No, sit.
20 pounds, 4 ounces. Okay. So on the growth curve, she was on the 25th percentile, and she has dropped down to the 10th percentile. Has she been maybe a little more active than normal?
Yeah, she's real active.
Is she a good milk drinker?
Well, not right now because she was sick and she wasn't allowed milk, so.
Okay, that was something the doctor had requested that you...
Yeah. Come here and get a bite of this. Come down and don't tear your diaper.
Come here, Angela. Can I have your bottle?
At least my mom knows
Come here.
that after I had Angie, that she's my baby, that I have to raise her in my way. I also need my mom's help because I don't know how to do some of this stuff, but my mom's right there for me. Hit me with that and
You hit the floor, Angela. The people downstairs will hit upward. Don't you? Take that off for now.
You know better than to do that.
That was bad.
I'm trying to be a role model of my mom and my grandma put together. Trying to be understanding and cooperative towards Auntie. I think I'll be a pretty good mom if Angie will cooperate.
I got you.
I hope she doesn't turn out to be like me, rebellion at the age of 13. I don't think I could handle that. As soon as she starts her menstrual cycle, I'll put her on birth control. Because I don't want her to end up and happen to have a baby the same time I do. Because sometimes it could ruin her life.
The issue of sexuality is having to be dealt with much earlier by young people now than before. One of the things is that biological maturity is taking place earlier, but the other thing is that the whole social context has changed so that there's more exposure to sexuality. There are expectations and pressures to get involved with sexuality earlier, and the opportunity structure for being sexual is different now. The availability of contraceptives has made a difference, but the openness of attitudes of young people about sexuality is a major issue that has changed. So one of the things that I think I'd want to stress about adolescence is the earlier facing of developmental tasks that used to be occur later in life.
Some teenagers express their emerging identity through what some might consider bizarre clothing and hairstyles. They feel bold, individualistic. Such clashes over style may actually help adolescents separate from their parents and establish their own identity. At least it seems that way to Nuket Curran. She's 17.
The whole point of growing up is like you want to break off from your parents. You want to become independent. You know, people kind of expect it in a teenager. It's like, oh, well, you know, she's dyeing her hair to be different. Well, you know, and I can't do that when I'm 35. I can't get a job looking like that. So, I mean, why not just do it now? You know, just do what I want to do and do how I feel, you know. So If I want to color my hair just because, I'll just color my hair just because. Tonight Jesse's having a going away party for Scott.
Parents and teenagers often disagree over matters of personal taste, but it's seldom over important issues. That's because adolescents and their parents generally share the same basic values.
Steak is not my
No.
all-time favorite.
No, it's not.
No,
Everybody.
witness for me. You know it's not.
It's true.
My parents take a lot too personally.
Your mother's a steak.
You know, like they think that I'm just doing things to like generally hurt them. You know, just like when you screw up, it's just kind of like you're defying their rules or something. If I defy them, like if they grounded me and I just left, that would be like, you know, that'd be a big deal here, you know, because they're my parents. They're like the police, you know, they're like the law.
In adolescence, as the brain continues to mature, young people become capable of a more sophisticated kind of thinking. Now they can imagine hypothetical situations, ideal societies, ideal parents, ideal schools. Often the real world comes up short.
I don't remember the exact date, but it's in between that time. Well, I think the educational system really stinks. There's so much pressure on this age group, just like to grow up quickly and go to college and accomplish something, make money, because it's kind of like it's a never-ending cycle. You're just constantly working to make more money, you know? It's kind of insane after a while, because what's the point? If you're not happy, what's the point of money then? Oh, I wish I had money.
This isn't too expensive.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
This is so cool.
See how much money I have. The music that I listen to pretty much reflects, you know, a certain kind of sadness. It's like a lot of people call it gloom. And it is in a way, because this is not the greatest time in my life. I wouldn't want to be this age again, ever. Right now, because there's so much happening as far as you changing and like, you know, you feel really unsettled, and so things kind of are inflated, like the small things that seem bad are inflated to be, they seem horrible. And you just feel so alone. Like that's the whole scare of being a teenager, is because so many people think they are entirely alone. I've known of people who've committed suicide, and I remember once when I thought about it, just because things seemed so horrible. They just seemed like everything was huge, like I've had this huge weight on my back, like, oh my God, everything's horrible. Why am I here, you know? Wouldn't it be better if I just died and like no one gives a damn about me, you know? And it's just like, I mean, everyone's got to think it.
But Nuket really thinks she has a lot to live for, starting with her friends.
You know, I'm closer to my friends as far as like more personal things than I am to my family. They are everything to me, as far as like they mean more to me than life. They're kind of like my life support. I don't know, my life source. They just keep me sane. Because then when they tell me, you know, they're feeling the same way as I am, then I don't think I'm really going crazy or losing it. Being a teenager is not easy, and whether you can remember it or not, however old you are as an adult, all I can say is just keep an open mind to that, you know, the idea that we're growing up, and we're gonna do stupid things, and we should be allowed to make stupid mistakes sometimes, to a point, you know. You've got to know where to draw the line.
Young children may accept the world the way it is, but as adolescents, they begin to imagine a world the way they wish it could be. So it's frustrating for them when society doesn't live up to their ideal, when their parents aren't as perfect as they once thought, and that can cause problems. Sun, sand, surf, and lots of girls in swimsuits. Myrtle Beach has it all. It's a vacation paradise for teenagers, but for Michael Shelton, who's 18, Myrtle Beach is home. The jets overhead are a familiar sight to Michael, who has spent most of his life on Air Force bases as the stepson of Senior Master Sergeant Gary Cale. For the sergeant's family, life on base means visibility and adhering to community standards. Even the length of the grass is dictated by military regulation. But for Michael, the impulses of youth are often at odds with his stepfather's code of conduct.
So his position is, just because I'm living in your house doesn't mean I'm still a child. And my position is, yes, it does.
Okay, I thought being a teenager would be being able to drive, being able to stay up as late as I wanted, being able to watch movies that were PG, really, and really being my own person.
He's in for short-term happiness. When I think of kids today, I think of them demanding instant gratification.
On the right, on the right. That's you.
Oh, yeah. Looking good.
Hey, hey.
No guy in his right mind is going to go out with a girl just for her mind or, you know, for her personality. You know, he's going to look at her looks. And I have to say that's, you know, mainly what I look for.
Well, Michael and I have never been extremely close. Maybe that's because he is my stepchild, and when his mother and I got married, he was about 7 years old. And possibly there was some resentment over the marriage breakup and subsequent remarriage of his mother.
It was like meeting a stranger, really, and calling him Dad. So it was a little bit hard.
85% of our people are dedicated to
I
that.
asked him, I said, is it all right if I call you Dad? And he said, yeah. But it took a little while, and it didn't sound right.
We're carrying our end. The problem is, what other ends do we have to carry too?
Now, someday you owe me a still life, not a monster.
And even to this day, like affection-wise, I stick to my mother a little bit more, you know, because I've been around her a lot longer, you know. She's my mother.
I used to make him little Batman capes, and he'd take his sunglasses and all crayons and coloring books and just do his thing, and that's what it started, 18 months old.
I tried to talk him into going into the Air Force, personally, because I think that he is not prepared for the rigors of college. He's a little immature.
I don't think I'd have enough responsibility to handle something that I wasn't really interested in. You know, it's like if, you know, you're not happy with what you're doing, you're not going to take the extra mile to do it better. Friends help you through it all, and your friends are more your age, so you can confide in them a lot easier, because, you know, you find out that their thoughts are like yours, and you're not the only one in the world that's ever, you know, thinking that way. Or your parents aren't the only meanies in the world. You know, all parents are like that, and, you know, you find that out, and it's amazing.
Adolescence is a period when children begin to question their identity. And they ask some very serious questions. One of the questions that they ask is, do they want to become the same adults that their parents are? And very frequently they find their parents wanting. As adolescents, they're beginning to understand a lot more about the interrelationships between adults. And they come to understand that all of us as adults are not as completely satisfied with our own lives and as strong as they thought we were when they were very young children and totally dependent on us. So suddenly they're faced with a question: when I make these next very important steps in my life, do I want to make them in such a way that I become like my mother or my father? And if I don't want to do that, what do I want to do?
You convert to one,
At a Boston prep school, what do I want to do is very much on the mind of Trey Edmondson. Trey's a senior. He's 17.
We need Mimi's step stool. Okay.
For the past 5 years, he's lived with his grandmother,
Trey,
his Aunt Deborah,
would you go get Charles, please?
his 2 cousins, and his Uncle Charles. Charles and Deborah are Trey's legal guardians.
I think of them more as my aunt and uncle, but I think they think of me as their son. You know, I've never called them mother or father. I always call them Deborah or Charles. And I'll always think of them as my aunt and uncle.
When Trey was 12, his mother developed kidney disease. She was already divorced from Trey's father, and Trey knew his mother was very sick.
I was so young, and I was like, why did she have to die, you know? I think to myself that I wish she could have, you know, just been around a little longer.
I can't imagine what it means to have your mother die at 12. I mean, my mother is such an important figure in my life, and someone who always took care of me. I mean, I don't care whether I was right, wrong, you know, what was going on. That kind of protection I depended on regularly. So I'm not sure what it all meant for him. Obviously, there was the anger and the hurt.
I just like to come in my room, close the door, and be by myself. I think I'm the kind of person who's independent. I feel that I'm very independent on myself. I like sometimes I like to be alone.
But Trey can't always be alone when he wants to be. He's often expected to shoulder big brother responsibilities, like taking Mimi and Percy to activities after school.
I know that taking them to these places is going to inconvenience me at times. But I know that I have to work my schedule around sometimes to fit, I guess, Mimi and Percy's needs. It's raining, dude.
Oh no, it's raining very hard. I love the rain.
It's really raining now. Come on, come on.
It's right. It's fine. It's boring. The little man is snoring. Make sure you can see the
Comma bar. No,
I got the top one. Now I get the bottom one.
Wait a minute, I want my picture.
The senior prom is an important night, not just for Trey, but also for his aunt and grandmother, who can't begin to conceal their pride in him.
Grandma, you need to move over a little.
The times that I'm experiencing now in my life are some of the most important times. And sometimes when I think about it, I wish that she was here. Good night.
Overall, I think that we have provided him with a consistency that's been very important, and that's probably been the ingredient that's gotten us from 12 to 18 in a pretty intact way.
I most look forward to graduating and going off to college. Even though I like being with my family, I like to be on my own. Teenagers are at that point where they're on the way to adulthood, but then they're also they were just kids, so they're in between. At times they want to be treated as adults, but then at times they would like to do some things that I guess kids would do. So they're like in that middle stage. They're going through like a big change in their life. I guess if you can get through teenage years, I guess a lot of other things would be real easier.
Young people can recover from developmental blows, but they're going to be changed, and they're going to be different as a result of it. They may have very different feelings about intimacy and how much they want to get involved in an intimate relationship. They may have changed ideas about identity, about who they are. The pain of a developmental blow won't necessarily go away, but the pain could feed into a kind of identity. I might think of myself and actually become a kind of person who's sensitive to pain, who perhaps is sensitive to the pain of others. And that may become a very central part of my identity as an adolescent and perhaps as a young adult.
We hope our children come through their adolescence with a sense of self-worth, of possibility, that they can turn their natural idealism into sensitivity and concern for the needs of others.
He walked up and down the streets.
Heather Robinson is 17. For over a year, she's been a volunteer at a weekly preschool story hour here at this library. She shares her love of books and language with her young friends.
Their fingers back at him and said, on every monkey was a gray or a brown or a blue or a red cat.
I read a lot of her stories.
Did you?
She does good writing.
Heather sets aside Sunday afternoons for another friend of a different generation, Mrs. Ida Rhine. They met 3 years ago through an organization that brings young and old together.
I just thought it would be nice to have a friend that I could help and do something for, and know that I'm making a difference in their life.
Oh, mercy.
It's slow going, huh?
I listened to them read her file, and they read that she was a blind woman who enjoyed going to concerts, and she had been a musician, and they had some notes on her interests like that, and they sort of reminded me a little of mine, so I thought we'd really hit it off, and we did.
I can't get over how much the little heroine in this book reminds me of you. She's real sweet and she's real spunky. She's neat. And she has
What was the title of the book?
It's called My Antonia.
Oh, yeah.
There have been many wonderful things I've seen and wonderful people that I've encountered with Mrs. Rhine, but there have been a few experiences that I'll never forget of people being very insensitive, you know, making her feel badly, that it takes her a little longer to walk or to find what she needs. And when she asks them, they get very impatient and hostile. I just think that greater attention has to be paid to the feelings of individual people.
In the last few years, Heather has thought a lot about feelings. She's become more reflective. Now she can look at the past, the present, and the future, and for the first time in her life, weave them together into a whole, into a story, her story. She can write of the pain of a family breakup, of her father moving away, and of the goodbyes she will have to say when she goes off to college. Goodbye to Ida, to her mother, to her friends, to everything she grew up with in this room. But Heather will carry an old dream with her, becoming a professional writer. Her mother remembers how it began.
When she was very young, before she learned to write, she would make up stories. In fact, she used to pretend there was a little family that lived in this room off the kitchen. And they were her friends, and she wrote stories about them. When she was very small, she would dictate the stories, and I'd write them. Her stories have kept pace with her age. You know, she writes wonderful stories now about teenagers, and she is a teenager. She just had one published in her high school literary magazine, a very fine one.
The story has a sardonic title, The Perfect Date. Heather writes about a Saturday night which ends badly. She writes of the mother's concern. How come you're back so early, honey? Did something go wrong? No, everything's fine, Mom. Want to talk about it, honey? No, Mom, I'm tired. Could we talk about it in the morning? Sure, baby. Don't worry about it. And don't forget, there are lots of wonderful evenings waiting for you.
Through my writing, I'd like to be able to let people know that if they're a person who is humane toward other people and kind to other people, and who does their best at whatever they're doing, that whatever they are is all right. And we're all so much alike,
We should just learn to see it.
Heather Robinson's come a long way in childhood and adolescence. She's come to see a larger world, to know what she believes in. She has an idea what she's good at, what she wants to be. There's been pain in her life, and as a result, she's different, but her face is as bright and as hopeful as it was that first day of school, just like these youngsters. Before long, Heather will make some big decisions about relationships, about family, about work, as she enters the next season of life, which is early adulthood.